Okay, everybody, welcome back for another Master of Command video. This time we're going to be taking a look at the patch notes. This is just going to be a lot of me talking, a lot of yapping, if you will. I'm going to be reading through a lot of the stuff that the developers have written. I might skip some stuff that I think is not really all that important. Like, I think they mention there's like a new map in here. Um, so I might skip around some sort of or some of these issues, but for the most part, I'm going to be just reading verbatim and maybe offering some thoughts on what I think about the changes. So let's go ahead and take a look at update 1.4.0 Scorched Earth. So here's the philosophy behind this update. This update reworks much of the game's pacing in battles and campaign. For battles, we've made changes less extreme and melee slower. Range combat has also slowed down as accuracy has been reduced on muskets as well as morale damage from volleys. For the campaign, the overall goal was to slow progression in the early to mid game and speed up the late game, which can often drag. Because of this change, you can expect it to take longer to build up your army. At the same time, we've lowered the amount of units the AI is fielding proportionately to the player. This should have the effect of making the battles a little smaller and thereby delaying the introduction of the large 5 brigade battles, which can often be time consuming. The 6th Brigade used in Act Three's HQ army has also been removed as a result of these changes. This is, I'm pretty sure this is actually not true. I should have, at least this last sentence, I mean. Um, I've been keeping up with updates on Discord. I find that the updates on Discord tend to be more accurate because the developer is just more active there, and so I think he wrote the I think he wrote these patch notes and then continued to make changes as they were playtesting, and he didn't update um, this here because according to Discord, they did remove the 6th Brigade, but then they added it back in because they said that the Act 3 HQ battle was too easy without the 6th Brigade. So just want to point out, I think there are some inaccuracies in the patch notes simply because playtesting was continuing and they were making tweaks up until like the last minute on this patch, and I just don't think that the patch notes reflect that. So I will try to correct those where I can, um, as far as I'm aware of them. Okay, next up. Besides pacing changes, we've upgraded the AI personalities introduced in our last update, defensive, balanced, offensive, to now feature 9 distinct personality profiles that not only have their own unique behaviors, but also some small bonuses that synergize with their strategies. For example, there is a new Gustavian personality which attempts to close in, fire a devastating volley, and charge your lines quickly. This personality comes with a slight charging and move speed buff to make this strategy more effective. Similar to how the player can get doctrines, the AI can now get one doctrine each battle. The larger aim with this update was to make battles feel less repetitive and less grindy, especially later in a run. Right now, progression for both the player and the AI ramps up too quickly, which causes large, time consuming battles to appear too often earlier in the game instead of being saved more for the end. This becomes especially noticeable in Act 3, where nearly every battle can turn into a long slog because progression was maxed out in Act 2. In a future planned update, Act 3 will likely be reworked even more to feel faster and more decisive so it does not overstay its welcome. Another major focus was reducing how extreme combat becomes in the late game. Stat scaling can reach absurd levels and destabilize balance, leading to situations like one charge routes or volleys that instantly shatter units. It should now be both harder and more expensive to build a large army equipped with top tier items. You may need to make sacrifices between focusing on quality or quantity. Okay, so just a couple of notes here. Um, Basically, a lot of these changes came about because the developers ran a poll in Discord, and they determined that most people were quitting the game or like stopping their runs somewhere at the end of Act Two, maybe beginning of Act Three, because they had finished the progression on their armies for the most part. They had maxed out brigades, maxed out units. They'd gone down the unit tree, and I mean that's probably the most fun part of the game, right? Is going around expanding your brigades, buying new units, upgrading them, And so once people had hit that kind of like in-game state with their own armies, they weren't bothering to actually finish the game. And that's where a lot of these changes are coming from. Um, I haven't played yet on the new patch to know what it feels like. Um, Theoretically, I like the idea of expanding that sense of progression through Act 3. Um, and so one of the things is your army will expand slower, and we'll go through that I think in the patch notes. But the AI will also not be as large as it was historically. So as long as they get that balance right, it should be fine. But if it's too balanced to, or if it's weighted too much towards slowing down the player without also um, decreasing the size of the AI, this could be difficult, but we'll see. I'm gonna go ahead and keep on reading. Um, One more thing that I want to note here is he says he wants to take out, or the developers say they want to take out kind of the absurd stat scaling. This does mean, in my opinion, not having played, just kind of like reading through here and thinking about it, I think this means that Act 3 is going to be more punishing because if your ability to, like, okay, I was just playing the Hungarian Vanguard, right? And so I had hussars that would come in, and like one or two units of hussars could just run in and destroy a unit and take minimal losses. If we can't do that anymore, that it means that your units are going to be getting hurt more. So I think that's going to make I think that's potentially going to make Act 3 even more challenging, because I feel like that's the, like, Act 1 and Act 2 are let's build up my army, right? And then Act 3 is let's maximize my army. Let's tweak it so that I'm getting like maximum performance out of it in order to minimize our losses. Or otherwise those battles are going to be very punishing. So we'll see. We'll see what this feels like. I'm hoping that the changes aren't too big for the player, so that we can kind of keep maximizing the performance of our army and minimizing our losses. But we'll see. There are also some big Act 3 changes that we'll talk about, so maybe it's fine. We'll see. Okay, AI overhaul. There have been 9 new personality profiles added. Each has their own unique fighting behaviors and a unique AI doctrine given to the army, which gives them certain buffs and debuffs. Each nation has their own preferences to which personalities they will use, such as Prussia preferring Frederican doctrine, but they can use all of them in order to give the game more variety. And each personality has their own offense/defense preference with different thresholds to utilize those stances. So here you can see all the icons and the names for the various AI doctrines. I'm gonna try to read the names. Forgive me if I'm not saying it right. So Sobieskian, Sobieskian. Um, this doctrine is focused on cavalry and high resilience. Its weakness is low range damage due to poor infantry accuracy. So they probably get a buff to their cavalry, but they take or they have reduced accuracy. This army is likely to be aggressive. It may defend if it has a large artillery advantage. Gustavian Doctrine. This doctrine is focused on delivering close range volleys followed by devastating infantry charges while maintaining high mobility. Its weakness is prolonged engagements due to slower reload speed. These guys will come up, they'll shoot once, and then they'll charge into you. This is going to be rough if you're fighting grenadiers or if you're fighting melee focused line infantry like Irish Fusiliers, Highlanders, Hungarians, etc. Hildburg Hauser. This doctrine is focused on highly mobile assault columns and attrition warfare. Its weakness is envelopment due to higher flanking damage received. Um, so it's not obvious what they're going to do with the mobile assault columns. I'm not sure if that means that they move faster or they tend to want to charge into you. I'm not sure. But from this, we can clearly infer that they're going to have a flanking damage debuff, right? So that they'll take more damage if you shoot them in the flanks. This army is very likely to be extremely aggressive. It may defend if it has a significant artillery advantage. And the next up are the balance profiles, the Mauritian Doctrine. This doctrine is focused on powerful, accurate volleys that can shock targets and break them quickly. Its weakness is low morale, with units being more susceptible to breaking under heavy pressure. Its army is unlikely to be aggressive. It may defend if it has a slight artillery advantage. Okay, so they get an accuracy buff and they get a morale debuff, it would seem. The Saxa Doctrine. This doctrine is focused on command and control with large officer command radiuses and high morale. Its weakness is increased officer death chance in units with attached officers. This army is likely to be aggressive. It may defend if it has a slight artillery advantage. So I have seen this in some gameplay. Their officers have a bigger command radius, right? So their morale radius is larger, and they give more morale than normal officers. But they are more likely to die. So if you can like focus down the units where the officers are attached, then you can theoretically rout the enemy pretty quickly because they'll see a big morale drop whenever their officers die. Federican Doctrine. This doctrine is focused on wide flanking maneuvers covering a large section of the battle with thin ranks and rapid firing to overwhelm the enemy. Its weakness is prolonged combat due to low stamina. So it seems like this army will try to get wide and envelop you, and they reload faster, but they've got reduced stamina. Um, Defensive profiles. The Downian, just going to go with Downian. Downian Doctrine. This doctrine is focused on artillery and range superiority. Its weakness is mobility and responsiveness to flanking. So they get an artillery buff, I would assume, and they are slower, it would seem. This army is unlikely to be aggressive. It may defend even without an artillery advantage. Blandian Doctrine. This doctrine is focused on disciplined infantry volleys and sustained range combat. Its weakness is hand-to-hand combat due to lower infantry melee skill. So you want to get into melees with these guys. You don't want to get into firefights, it would seem. It's not obvious to me what their what their bonus is here, but it's definitely going to revolve around like shooting. We can infer at least that much. And then last is the Municher Doctrine. This doctrine is focused on the use of cover and greater effectiveness around officers. Its weakness is vulnerability to being surrounded due to increased flanking damage. Okay, so they take increased damage if you fire on their flanks. It's kind of interesting because we already saw that, right, with this one, the Hildburg Hauser. But I guess the difference is these guys are going to be really aggressive, and these guys are going to be fairly defensive. Here's some AI fixes. Fixes to the AI where sometimes an artillery or infantry unit would go idle if it didn't find a valid path. Okay. Fix the bug where HQ battles, the AI's personality would show as a white box instead of a proper icon. I pointed that out in my last video. I thought that was kind of interesting. Um, Improvements made to defensive AI posture. Fixed to an AI where it would avoid sitting in the river. Okay, the old personality traits have been removed. Makes sense. Light infantry now has a bias toward using field work, so they are less susceptible to being charged down. Okay. Act 3 update. So this is big. Put your listening hat on. Act 3 has two new mission types, capture and rescue. The capture mission now appears on enemy territories and has you taking forts and seizing convoys. The region will be full of the new Marauder armies detailed below. The rescue mission only appears on friendly territories and has you securing battlefields and dismantling slums. It is also full of the Marauder armies detailed below. All settlements in Act 3 no longer start off pillaged. This is good for players because that means that you're no longer going in and having to buy everything at like a 50% price hike. So this will bring down the prices of items in Act 3. That's pretty good. Most patrols of Act 3 replaced with a new army type, Marauders. Marauders are larger than patrols, they burn down settlements, and have higher amount of loot than patrols. There are only 2 Marauders in Act 3, instead of the typical approximately 7 patrols you'd find in Act 3. This means fewer but more meaningful battles, especially since by Act 3 the battles tend to be larger and take longer. I found it tedious previously to get through Act 3 when it was full of many patrol armies that took a while to fight. You can expect about 2 patrols and 2 marauders in Act 3, but we will keep an eye on your playthroughs and adjust this ratio over time. So, um, I believe, yeah, okay, it says it right here. So there are 2 patrols and 2 marauders in Act 3. That means there's going to be fewer battles in Act 3, which also means it's going to be more difficult to build up your army in Act 3 because I mean, the most reliable way to progress is to fight battles, to win them well, and then to take the gains from the money that you get from the battle, the rewards that you select, and then the loot that you gain. You take those 3 and you use it to get ahead in the game. That's going to be a little bit more difficult in Act 3 with there being fewer patrols and then only 2 of these Marauder armies. So it looks like they're like on par with field armies. So um, they shouldn't be as hard as like an encamped army, but they will be more challenging than a patrol. Let's see. One trying to see, did he mention explicitly? Okay, yes. Marauders burn down settlements. So, that means that if you want to make sure that there's still a lot of like towns and villages on the map that you can resupply at, you want to take out these marauder armies pretty quickly, or else they'll just run around and burn everything down. And if they burn down all of the villages and towns, you're gonna have a hard time resupplying your army and being ready for the HQ fight at the end. Okay, so here's some campaign changes. Global replenishment rate has been slowed down slightly. You need to recover a little bit longer after bloody battles. Replenishment gain from drilling increased from plus 40% to plus 50%. So they're kind of nudging us into using drilling more often. I tend not to drill, except for in Act 3. Whenever I have like a bunch of elite units and they have slow replenishment, then I will sometimes drill. But I think they're trying to nudge us to use drilling more often. Shops have more money in Acts 2 and 3 by about 150, so that selling off goods isn't as tedious due to shops running out of cash. Yeah, I think that's good. Ammunition costs are 20% higher at shops. The cost itself hasn't changed, but the amount of ammunition you get for the same price has decreased. Manpower costs are 10% higher at shops. Shops at settlements now store more food and ammunition to buy from by about 20%. So these are going to be more expensive to buy, but they will be more plentiful. Cash gain from plunder for fighting battles has been increased in Act 1 and 2, but remains the same in Act 3. Okay, so we'll get a little bit richer in Act 1 and 2. Of course, you also have to factor in that there are some price increases here, and I think we're gonna get to some more stuff later. I won't spoil it, but uh, yes, they needed to increase the amount of money that we get. The amount of loot received from battles has been reduced in all cases except the HQ fights. At the same time, we increased the chance of higher quality loot drops. Cannons are now more likely to be part of loot drops from battles. Ammunition and manpower gain from prisoners has been decreased by negative 5%. I should just say decreased by 5%. Um, Item slots costs increased by 20%. So, so for example, that last item slot costing you 400, now it's up to 480. So you're not going to feel this as much in the beginning, but once you get to like, was this the 5th item slot that you're unlocking? It's going to start to hurt a little bit, and probably arguably these last slots may not even really be worth it unless you're overflowing with money. Brigade slot costs increased as well. So these you can see there's a 200%, sorry, not 200%, 200 taller increase in the first, or opening up to the second brigade, 400 to open third, 800 to open the fourth, and then a whopping 1100 increase to open the final brigade. So we've reduced the AI army sizes as well, making larger armies rarer until the end of the game. It should be completely viable to end Act 1 with only 2 brigades of high quality or 3 brigades of low to mid quality. We'll see how this plays out in the game. I haven't tested it myself. Um, all AI armies have been reduced in size, most notably in Acts 2 and 3. The final HQ of Act 3 no longer has reinforcements of a second HQ battle and has just 5 brigades instead of 6. Like I said earlier, I believe this is inaccurate. I think they added the 6th brigade back in. The result should be less large-scale battles until the very end of the game, making the fights less of a grind, especially going into Act 2. AI armies run away slightly less frequently than previously. Okay, so they're more likely to pick a fight with you. You can now stack doctrines you already have when you get to Act 3. I I kind of like I like the idea of only having one of each doctrine, but I know some people might like stacking certain doctrines. So, I mean this will help you like hyper specialize more, whereas I just like taking the different doctrines for the variety and for the spice of life. Okay, number of patrols in Act 2 reduced slightly, the battles are long, and now that the AI has the personality profiles, the fights are tougher and time consuming. And because Act 3 has been made slightly easier, the player does not need to take so many fights in Act 2 in preparation. Again, we'll see about this. I like taking a bunch of fights because that's how I get my army stronger. It kind of makes me nervous anytime they say we've reduced the number of battles. Like, saying we've reduced the number of battles, but we've made the fights harder. Um, I don't know. I feel like the like it's at odds with each other, right? Like I need to have a high number of battles in order to get stronger. If the fights are tougher, then that means I'm going to be coming out of battles with more casualties. I'm going to have to spend more money just replacing my losses. I mean, if the changes aren't too big, right, then it shouldn't be bad. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Raiding speed slowed down by 1 day, so you can't destroy a town as quickly raiding it. Auxiliary barracks condition at settlements, which let you recruit local troops, only had a 1% chance of appearing because I had lowered the weight in the last update. I increased the weight slightly, so it's at a 5% chance compared to the approximately 9% chance of any other condition appearing. I like this. I think it's interesting to be able to um, buy units that you wouldn't normally be able to get. So I like the idea of increasing the chance of it spawning because I feel like I only have found this like once or twice, and it'd be interesting to see it more often. Major change made to the HRE. Mustering costs $4 per regiment in Army instead of 5. Mustering reservists gain per day is now 20 per regiment daily instead of 25. However, you can use the updated extended training doctrine to negate this debuff. Mustering also now gives you a recruit with 2 veterancy per brigade you have open instead of 1 veterancy. This is because opening brigade slots is much more expensive now, and the mustering buff falls off in effectiveness late game. So this change should make mustering more viable toward the end of the game now, where mustering with a full 5 brigades would get you a level 10 veterancy recruit who can instantly get promoted up to a musketeer. I think that's a good change. I think that strengthens the HRE. Um, and it strengthens mustering, which is kind of like one of their stances they really need to be playing around. Okay, so raiding takes an extra day on both villages and cities. Cities provide 1 additional loot item when raided successfully. Cool. Raiding and suppression missions no longer require raiding 5 settlements, but instead just 4. This is due to raiding taking longer. Push back all 3 Act HQ times by 10 days to give players more time to develop their army since progression has been slowed down. Okay, that sounds good. I guess you have more time to run around and do encounters. Theoretically, you have more time to find patrols as well, or take on encamped armies. So yeah, that's fine. Players on the harder difficulties were earning about 20% more dollars than players on regular difficulty due to the inaccurate reports modifier, which adds additional enemy units to fight. We have adjusted the inaccurate reports to no longer provide additional loot bonuses. I dislike this change because Mm, I think all of the difficulty modifiers make the game harder just for the sake of making it harder. The one exception to this was inaccurate reports, where there was a risk reward to it, right? Where you were fighting more units, but you were also getting more rewards for destroying those units. Um, and I like that. I like the idea of risk reward, right? Like this is more risky, but the reward is greater. And this change just makes it so that you get less of that reward. Um, Technically, there's still a little bit of reward to it because, I mean, your guys can still benefit from the experience of fighting extra enemies. So I guess there is still a slight reward factor to it, but that reward is definitely less than it was before. And I think that this difficulty modifier no longer has like that good payoff that I usually associate with it. Okay, combat changes. Global morale damage has been reduced by about 10%, making combat slightly slower. Artillery morale damage has not been affected, so artillery will still cause the same morale shock as it did previously. Combat effectiveness buff for morale is now 5 to 10% instead of 10 to 20% because morale doesn't go down as quickly as it used to. Stamina also only provides 5% combat effectiveness buff instead of 10% when you have very high stamina. These changes were made because it was too easy to get your combat effectiveness to such a level that your stats start overflowing. A new formula has been applied to morale damage, which diminishes it at high levels. This means if an insanely high amount of morale damage is stacked all on one unit, it will no longer instantly shatter the unit, but will still reduce that unit's HP and max morale value as per normal. This has been done to prevent strategies that revolve around stacking many items and skills that improve morale damage and accuracy and focus firing down units to shatter them in a single volley. This also prevents melees from being exploited, where sending in several units at once can cause ridiculous morale damage from each charge impact. Overall, I think this is a good change. Um, there were a couple of instances where I would put a unit on the line, and if they were getting shot by 2 or 3 units all at once, that unit would only survive like two, maybe 3 volleys, and then they would break and run away and possibly even shatter. So I like the idea that um, that morale damage being stacked on them is no longer so massive. Rivers and marshes now reduce stamina slightly more than they used to while being crossed in battle. Charge impacts now deal less morale damage for the charging unit and defending unit to make melees slightly less decisive. The amount of kills was never too extreme in melees, but the morale shock could end up being way too high if the player stacked lots of cavalry with very high charge skill. So imagine the Hungarian Vanguard playthrough, right, where we just had insane charge and we were destroying units. Charge impacts are now slightly more deadly for the charging unit and defending unit. So they deal less morale damage, but they deal more like HP damage. Charge momentum is built slightly slower, making it less effective to cycle charge. Charge momentum is depleted much more slowly on the impact of a charge. The effect of this is simply that you can't pull out of a charge as easily. You must wait for the momentum bar to deplete fully before being able to pull out. This makes cycle charging harder. Um, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the other effect here is that you are getting your charge bonus for longer, aren't you? Um, once you are in the melee. Um, I mean, I think that's true, but that's not explicitly stated here. Because charges deal less damage, we reduce the stamina cost in charging from 10 to 6. Um, okay. Melee damage is now 3 times slower compared to before, giving you more time to react to melees before they're over. Fire flanking damage has been slightly increased due to muskets going down in accuracy. Nav rewards flanking more, but frontal combat is less decisive. This is very interesting. I'm going to be playing with the Frycore next, and I definitely want to be taking advantage of the mobility and the reload speed of the Frycore and getting on the enemy's flanks. So I definitely want to try that out. Free Fire now only deals minus 30% less morale damage instead of 35%, I guess, negative. I kind of don't like the way this is written. Free fire now only deals 30% less morale damage instead of uh 35% less morale damage, I guess is how you would correct that. I don't know. Compared to volley fire, making it more viable. So you're going to do slightly more morale damage, is what this means, using free fire. Attack column formations take slightly less morale damage when fired upon compared to a thinner line formation. Okay. Troops in open order now suffer 1.5 times the charge damage received instead of 2 times, making them less vulnerable to being charged down so easily. Um, hills provide 20% cover now instead of 30%. Just seem too easy to stack items and cover effectiveness while on a hill and naturally get very high amounts of cover. I feel like hills are kind of like rare and sporadic in the game, so I feel like even if they were at 30%, that's not like a massive bonus. I mean, some of the maps, the hills are placed in good positions where you can take advantage of them, but I feel like there's also some hills where, like, I don't want to use them because they just seem kind of like random and they're out in the open and you can't form a line because you have like a hill here, but then there's like a ton of open space and that's not a position I want to hold, but it's fine. This is like a negligible change. I'm just being picky. Any effect that specifies melee damage received now also includes charge damage received. This should make the French King's household scale better in the late game, where previously, if the enemy stacked hussars with high charge damage, they could wipe out one of your Royal Cavalry units on impact, even if they had the melee damage received buffs. I like this. I think this is a good change. Because like it says here, you could just get around this melee damage received modifier by putting a bunch of charge onto a unit and destroying it before the melee like even really happened. So this is good. I like it. This will make all of the armor equipment more effective, like the great coats, the heavy jackets, the breastplates. Those are all going to be good, better now. I mean, they already were good, but they're going to be better. So I think that's a really good change. Sprint speed of the general is now slightly faster. Good with that. All unit prices have gone up by $50. The AI fields fewer men, and so the player should not create such a large army so quickly. We've decreased the minimum reload value slightly so that it's not as hard to reach fast reload speeds. A higher reload skill should now result in slightly faster firing speeds. All recruit prices have gone up by an additional 25 to 50 in addition to the aforementioned increase. Oh, that kind of stinks. So recruit units are going to be even harder to pick up because they're going to be at least $75 up to $100 more expensive. Provincial cavalry for all nations have been strengthened slightly, which is fine because provincial cavalry is pretty lackluster. I feel like all it's really good for is chasing down a routing unit. The French Volontaire Dragoon has been redesignated to light cavalry and has had its stats updated. All HRE Imperial Cavalry charge skill increased by 5. This is good because, I mean, this is good for the HRE because their cavalry was extremely lackluster. And if you saw me playing the Hungarian Vanguard campaign, whenever I saw the Imperial Cavalry, I was like, oh, these guys are a joke. We're just going to steam right through them. HRE Saxon Tartar Cavalry charge skill decreased by 5. I really liked the Tartar Cavalry when I was using them in my HRE playthrough. So it kind of makes me sad that they've been nerfed a little bit. Um, they were pretty much on par with Hungarian Hussars, but now that they've been slightly nerfed, Hungarian Hussars are like they are definitively the best light cavalry unit. I think even before this nerf, the Hussars were better, but these guys were really close. With the nerf, it's the Hungarian Hussars 100%. All HRE Kreis infantry have 5 more morale, with the exception of the Imperial Recruit. Okay, I think that's fine. Higher tier HRE Kreis units now have normal replenishment, including their grenadiers and cuirassiers, letting them suffer more casualties and recover quickly. That's good. Saxon Tartar cavalry has been given slow replenishment, so another nerf to them. French Irish units now field larger battalions for fusiliers and grenadiers. However, they have had their speed, stamina, and melee decreased by 5. So they got a unit size buff, but a stat debuff. So I don't know. Maybe this is a neutral change. Just kind of depends on whether you value unit size more or stats more. All Prussian Freikorps infantry have 5 more accuracy. That's good. Freikorps are extremely inaccurate, so that helps them be a little bit better. British Foot Guards have had their accuracy increased by +5 and reload by +5. I think that's also good. I feel like the British Foot Guards aren't they when I played with them, I feel like they weren't so good that I was like, wow, this is amazing. Um, so I think I think that's a good change for them. Increase the weight of Saxon and Imperial recruits up to 5 instead of 0, so there's a chance of mustering them in Act 3. This is especially because of the change made to mustering, which increases their veterancy massively, making it easier to instantly promote your mustered recruit to a higher tier unit in the late game. Okay, so this is going to be interesting. I'm going to try to like run through this a little bit faster and not just read everything verbatim. Some army compositions were strengthened to better withstand the early game battles, which now are tougher due to the AI personality system. All compositions now start with 25 more dollars, just to give slight compensation for the price increases. Here's a big one. All compositions now have a new stat called Recruitment Bias, which you can find on their Doctrine preview. The biases change the frequency of the types of units you can find at settlements to recruit from. This makes each composition have more of a focus. For example, it's now much easier to properly roleplay the Saxon army under the HRE due to their dominant Saxon recruit bias. Both mustering and traditional recruitment will lean heavily towards Saxon troops. So here's an example. There's a dominant Saxon recruitment bias. I was initially very hesitant to see this change go through. However, I think now it's probably a good change because this will let you um, play into the strengths of certain compositions more. So, for example, the Hungarians are more likely to find Hungarian units. The border troops are more likely to find Grinzer units, and that is what they want to play into, respectively, right? Hungarians want Hungarian light cavalry, and then the border troops want Grinzer units for good light infantry. Um, and my apprehension here was that I think it hurts the replay value, right? If I play as the Saxons and like all I find are Saxons every time I play them, like what if there's one time I play them and I'm like, hey, I want to play with more Imperial units? Um, the upside to this is that there is a mod which if you don't like the recruitment bias you can actually disable it with the mod. So I so with that being said, I like it in that now there are two different ways you can play the game. You can play it with the recruitment bias on, or you can play it with the recruitment bias off, so you're getting a more random assortment of troops. And I think anything that adds a little bit more variety and choice in how you can play the game, I think that's good. Okay, Britain. So what are the changes to Britain? They are getting $10 a day now, and instead of 8, so slight buff there. And the brigade penalty cost has been reduced to 20% instead of uh, an extra 25%. So um, this is technically a buff for them, but the change to the brigade costs is a overall debuff for them, so that's just compensating for that. Granby was changed. His second trait was meticulous, which was an infantry boost. So he ended up being this like awkward. He could go cavalry, he could go infantry, um, but now he is meant to specialize in cavalry. I mean, if you want him to be specialized. The Hanoverian Corps now starts with a Hanoverian foot unit. Um, so that's good. Subsidy troops had to change, so now they've got a Brunswicker Grenadier instead of a Hessian Grenadier. That way, with the Hessian, you can decide if you want them to go Veteran Musketeer or if you want them to go Grenadier. So it just gives players a little bit more choice. Whereas the Brunswicker Grenadier,
that was a linear upgrade. You could only go from Musketeer to Grenadier, so they decided to change that and just give you this Grenadier since that was the only upgrade. With Austria, they changed the border troops a little bit. So their light infantry range was reduced to 25%. And instead of starting with a Grinzer recruit, they get a Grinzer Grenadier. So this is they have an overall stronger start, albeit they have less flexibility in what you want to do with them since they did get rid of a recruit unit. Okay, Hungarian Vanguard now starts with a good light bayonet and a shepherd's axe. A good shepherd's axe, I should say, to make your infantry better. The charge damage buff has been reduced to 20%. It's it's probably for the best just to make the Hungarian Vanguard a little balanced, a little more balanced, I should say, because the plus 25 charge was insane. Um, although I kind of like getting these insane buffs that make units broken. So if you like balance, this is a good change. If you like broken units, this is a not good change for you. The Freikorps now start with a veteran Freikorps Jaeger instead of just a normal Jaeger. Russia had some changes here that are meaningful. So instead of rating being 100% faster, it's now only 75%. And the extra food consumption was reduced from 15 to 10%. And the Imperial Army now starts with a Dragoon instead of a reserve musketeer. Um, it adds a little bit more mobility versus a musketeer unit. Observation Corps, they have a observation fusilier now instead of a musketeer, and the cover effectiveness buff has been decreased from plus 50% to plus 30%. Cossacks saw a change as well. Um, now they are all mounted, and they have a Don Cossack and 2 Cossack cavalry. Here it says that they have 3, but I'm pretty sure I checked in the game, and they only have 2 Cossacks and then a Don Cossack. They now start with an additional lance to replace a gold brooch that they had, and then their doctrine, which makes them lose $5 per regiment daily when not in force march or raiding, was increased. So you definitely want to make sure you're running around in force stance or in force march or raiding stance. France. France's national doctrine reduced to a 20% brigade cost discount instead of 50% since the brigade cost was raised so high. Um, I think this is I think this is like a big nerf to France because their brigade cost was decreased by so much. Um, they increased the cost of the brigades and then they reduced your discount. So I feel like this is like a massive nerf to France. In all honesty, uh, I don't know. We'll just see how that plays out. France's Lower Rhine army had a Royal Recruit swapped out for a Royal Grenadier, so here he's right here. Helps them play into melee easier, and their starting cash was reduced by 100, so it has more food to compensate. France's House of the King composition bonus for melee damage reduction has been reduced from a 25% reduction to a 15% reduction. Its malice has also been changed from plus 10% infantry cost to uh, negative 10% replenishment speed. The nerf was made to their melee damage received since melees go on longer now and they benefit from this more. Melee damage received as a stat is also more powerful. Yep. We talked about that. Their malice was changed to give the player an additional challenge once they're fielding a big stack of heavy Royal cavalry, since this composition can be so powerful. What I dislike about this change, I don't mind the melee damage reduction since they are also reducing charge damage now. What I don't like is that their replenishment speed is now their debuff, which is the same as the light core. So two of the French army compositions have the same replenishment speed debuff, except it's more severe on the light core than it is the King's Household. So yeah, I just dislike that two compositions in the same nation have the same debuff. I think they should change this to something else, just so that there's like more variety. Okay, HRE mustering stance was improved. Yeah, we read about that earlier. HRE Saxon army has had its veteran musketeer changed to a Saxon grenadier, and now starts with a basic palash sword. The auxiliary corps had its Bavarian musketeer upgraded to a veteran Bavarian musketeer, so they're going to be stronger. Um, this is just a straight up upgrade. This is like a side grade. If you want a unit that's better in melee, this was a good trade. If you want a unit that was better at shooting, this was a downgrade for you. So this one is kind of mixed, just depending on what you like. This one is a straight up upgrade for the auxiliary corps. There are some new doctrines. So reformed commissariat doctrine, which reduces item slots, the cost of item slots by 25%. This does not reduce your item slots by 25%. It reduces the cost of the item slots by 25%. Helps you mitigate the increased item slot cost. Trained reservist, which increases your army replenishment by 25%. That's good. I always thought that this was something that needed to be added into the game, considering there were things that debuffed your replenishment, like playing as the light core or playing on the difficulty modifier that gives slower replenishment. So I think this is a good doctrine, um, especially if you're playing as the light core, or if you're playing as the King's Household, or if you're playing on playing with the difficulty modifier thing that increases your army replenishment. I think this is good. Um, Mass mobilization doctrine decreases brigade and reservist costs by 10%, also letting you mitigate those price hikes. Okay. Prepared positions doctrine, which boosts cover effectiveness by 15%, but lowers move speed by 5%. This is helpful for the observation corps, who had their cover effectiveness decreased by 10% this update. So if you want to take up really good, strong defensive positions, don't care too much about um, having a mobile army, the prepared positions doctrine is good for you. Human wave attacks, which buffs your charge damage, now reduces morale by 5% instead of reducing replenishment by 10%. Salary reduction, which decreases recruitment costs, now reduces replenishment speed by 20% instead of morale by 5%. Um, I dislike this change. I think if you're playing on normal difficulty, this is fine. Like 20% reduction to your replenishment speed isn't terrible. But if you were playing with the replenishment speed debuff difficulty modifier, this is going to make your campaign really tough. And if you are playing as the light core or as the King's Household, this is going to be like super crippling to your campaign, because you've just um you've just stacked like 50% replenishment speed debuffs like at a minimum. So I don't think I would ever take this unless I was playing on like normal difficulty, but definitely not good playing on the harder difficulties. Extended training now gives HRE plus 25% more reservist muster per day instead of being useless. That's awesome. Updated all three of the proficiency doctrines: infantry proficiency, cavalry proficiency, artillery proficiency. Previously, each proficiency boosted veterancy gain for its respective type and reduced veterancy gain for all opposite types. So, for example, you were getting more cavalry veterancy, but then you weren't getting as much veterancy on your artillery and infantry. So now that debuff has been removed and replaced with a recruitment bias. So if you take cavalry proficiency, you'll get a veterancy gain buff, as well as a recruitment bias for finding more cavalry units at settlements. I like that. I think that's a really good change, especially if you're leaning into I want an infantry heavy army, I want a cavalry heavy army. I think this is really good because I was almost never taking these. Yeah, this is good. Most doctrines which provide combat effectiveness now provide 5% less of it. This includes light infantry tactics, which is now 10% combat effectiveness. Soldier King's Legacy, which is at 10% as well. British Grenadiers Malice is no longer heavy infantry costs, but instead heavy infantry replenishment speed. The difficulty modifier, absent quartermasters, slows down replenishment by minus 25% instead of 30%. So I'm good with this change because this affects me, and I hate having really low replenishment. Um, but just because this was decreased, you're not going to see me taking salary reductions. No way. Um, Cadence Marching Doctrine now gives plus 20 plus 10% infantry stamina and 5% infantry speed instead of 5 infantry stamina and 5 infantry speed. Here are the new maps. Very cool. I love getting new maps added. Kind of makes the game more fun. There's a bunch of item changes. Sorry, I'm just kind of seeing how much we have left. All right, we're finishing up. I can stay strong. Item changes. Many items had a pass over their price and stats. I only noted the most significant changes. Some items also now have a third effect, very cool, instead of just two. Furthermore, many weapons are now less potent at higher levels to make them less impactful on how powerful a unit is. We were finding it too easy to stack many excellent tier items and weapons on a unit and making them overpowered. Yeah, they were really strong when you put a bunch of items on them, but it felt necessary in order to play the game. Maybe at least on the higher difficulties. Canister shot deals slightly less damage and consumes slightly higher ammunition, so it's a nerf to canister. Buckshot provides 5 less accuracy. Another nerf. Buck and ball provides 10 less accuracy. So they keep nerfing the specialty ammunition types, which kind of makes me like not want to use them. Artillery gunners implements now provide a stamina buff in addition to reload. That's a really good change. Cylindrical ramrods provide higher reload bonuses. I like that. Entrenching tools now boost stamina instead of reducing it. I think this is a really good change because I would almost never put entrenching tools on my units, and now I'm incentivized to do it. So I like that. Elevation screws are now considered a field implement, which means it's not mutually exclusive with the other artillery equipment. I like this. This means that you don't have to debate whether to have like a tow worm or a water bucket or an elevation screw on your artillery. You can have elevation screw and a tow worm, elevation screw and a bucket, whatever you want. Spontoons now provide slightly higher morale. Cool. Water buckets no longer mutually exclusive with other artillery equipment. Awesome. So now you can put water buckets on all your artillery and get their reload down. Tompions cost more. Probably makes sense. Tompions were often my go-to um, for like a gun tool. Tow worms now provide less accuracy but higher reload. Field engineer staff's main bonus is now range instead of cover, the result being better low tier engineer stats. That's good. I like the range. Commissars now buff reload skill and reduce ammo consumption instead of buffing veterancy gain and ammo consumption. So if you like getting more reload, this is good. If you like stacking veterancy gain on your guys, that's bad for you. Drill Master no longer reduces morale, but now reduces morale damage received. Okay, that's good. That means Drill Master got a good buff. Markman's accuracy buff is now lower, but instead of a debuff to reload, it provides a slight max range buff. I think that's good. Surgeon no longer reduces attrition. Instead, it restores casualties and boosts veterancy gain. That's good. Horn musicians now provide better morale damage buff received. Sorry, I feel like I read that wrong, but hopefully you guys get the idea. Um, Regular cartridge boxes and limber chests now slightly buff reload. That's good. You're more incentivized to put them on. Large cartridge boxes and limber chests no longer reduce move speed, just provide a large ammo consumption buff. Nice. Haversacks now provide morale and move speed buff instead of morale and stamina. I think this is kind of like a neutral change. Just depends on whether you like speed more or stamina more. Large haversacks now provide morale and stamina instead of morale and lowering move speed. So if you liked having stamina on your haversack, you go with the large one. If you like having move speed, you go with the normal one. Large canteens now provide stamina and morale instead of stamina and lowering move speed, so that's a buff for them. Full gators now buffs morale and move speed instead of move speed and stamina, differentiates from half gators. Um, I kind of liked the full gators giving stamina just because it made me think, okay, full gators, I'm going to throw these onto my melee infantry, and then half gators, I'm going to throw those onto um my line infantry. I guess you could put this on your line. I don't know. I think I would be more inclined to just put half gators on everyone now. But there are some situations, like maybe if you have a recruit, maybe you would give them the morale bonus. I don't know. I don't like stacking morale items. I feel like morale is one of those. It's like a stat where you don't need it until you need it. Which, um, what I mean is, like, you don't need morale until your unit is getting low on morale, and then you're like, oh no, like I wish I had more morale. But if you just give your unit stats that make them better in combat, then theoretically their morale won't drop low anyway, if that makes sense. At least that's how I view it, which is why I tend not to put morale items on my units and why I tend not to go for like morale officer traits. Um, I mean, this could maybe be good on low morale units like the French or the HRE, but I don't know. Sturdy shoes now massively buffs move speed instead of being a cheap, objectively worse version of the Gator items. I think that's good. Sturdy boots for cavalry now boost stamina instead of move speed. He probably means the cavalry boots. Blanket rolls no longer reduce attrition and melee damage received, but instead reduce melee damage received and boost stamina. That's a good change. Great coats no longer reduces melee damage received and attrition, but instead melee damage received and boosts morale. That's good, mostly because the attrition is that's like a nothing burger stat, whereas morale is at least something. Stiffened jackets no longer reduces stamina but buffs it, making it a good choice for light cavalry instead of defaulting to breastplates. Yep, that's a good change. Breastplates no longer reduce move speed as its secondary effect, but now very slightly reduces fire damage received. Awesome, like that. Skull caps no longer reduce stamina. Nice. Medicinal herbs no longer reduces attrition but boosts morale. That's fine. Chi secondary effect replaced from morale to be move speed buff instead. Again, I like this because I think move speed is more valuable than morale in most cases. T accuracy reduced but reload skill increased to make it an all-rounder item. That's fine. That's kind of how I've been using T anyway. Frisian horses provide slightly less melee damage. Basket hilt swords no longer tank your accuracy as their secondary effect, but now slightly reduce your reload. Saxatritus now gives slight melee and morale buff instead of huge morale buff and tiny melee buff, so I think that's good. Bland Treatise now provides accuracy and veterancy gain. I like that. Frederick Treatise reload buffed, cool. I'm not even going to attempt to say this because I'm definitely going to butcher it. But this treatise now provides max range and melee skill instead of reducing fire damage and buffing accuracy. Oh, okay. So this was like your go-to treatise for line infantry. Um, Max range and melee skill is kind of, I feel like that's kind of a funky. That's kind of a funky combination because increasing max range makes me think you want to keep the enemy unit at range. The melee skill makes it like, oh, you want to get in and fight them. Um, this is kind of a funky change. I kind of dislike it because I feel like these two are at odds with each other. Whereas reducing fire damage and buffing accuracy, those I feel like those go well together. I mean, I could see it being good on like a skirmisher unit but yeah, I don't know. Charles the 12th treatise now slightly reduces reload instead of massively reducing it. Santa Cruz light infantry treatise now reduces fire damage received and buffs accuracy instead of providing accuracy with move speed. Okay, so the light infantry treatise was changed to have these instead of the this treatise. So I guess that's why they made that change. The Cleric treatise provides cover and morale instead of cover and max range. Um, I don't like morale, so I think that's a nerf to this item. The Cohorn treatise now provides max range and reload instead of accuracy and cover. Um, Overall, this is probably a good change because artillery will use range and reload, whereas cover probably less needed, unless you were using this for like close artillery support using canister, then I see it being useful. But yeah, otherwise the cover bonus wasn't all that helpful. All melee weapon stats have been changed, and many swords now affect both morale and stamina. Kind of interesting. We also made the penalty on bayonets slightly higher for reload/accuracy, since it's now easier to make your bayonets on and off by default using the camp quality of life change that allows you to define your default equipment for deployment. Guns no longer provide +4/+6 accuracy per good/excellent tier, and instead provide +2/+4 accuracy per tier. That said, the reload stat has been increased per tier from +2/+4 to +3/+5. Higher tier weapons have gone up in price by about $20. All items that provide cover effectiveness now provide 5% less of it per tier of the item. All deployables have had reworks. Shavota Freeze now provides some melee resistance in addition to charge resistance. Previously, charge resistance just helps deal damage back to the attacker, but now they will actually reduce the amount of damage being received. I'm curious to see what stakes look like because I feel like wooden stakes were just objectively the worst, um, like field item, deployable, I guess you could say. Whereas the Shavota Freeze were good for resisting charge, and the earthworks are good for reducing fire damage, increasing your cover. So I hope that stakes now have. I hope that stakes have more utility. Maybe the utility is that they provide charge resistance, whereas this provides melee resistance. I don't know. We'll see. Delft Carbine was using the wrong stat for its melee. It has been fixed, reducing the melee it provides by 4. The Charles XII treatise now reduces reload skill instead of accuracy so that you can focus on delivering one powerful volley or charging in, just like the Swedes would do. All bronze and special artillery have gone up by $100. Okay, so they're more expensive. Gold tiered items can be found more commonly in Act 1. I like that. Some items which weren't appearing much at all in shops, such as grenades and carbines, now appear more often. Jaeger rifles made slightly less rare. Cool. Because the melee damage received stat also reduces charge impact stat, I've debuffed all items using this stat since it is considerably more powerful. That makes sense. All items that reduce attrition were reworked. Um, and so blanket rolls and greatcoats had their items or had their stats changed to morale and stamina. Cool. Officer stat or officer trait changes. Spartan reduces melee damage received by 10% now instead of 15%. But boost stamina by +15 instead of 10%. Overall, I would say this is, even though this got nerfed a little bit, I think this is I would say this is overall a buff because you're now reducing the charge damage received and you're getting a boost to your stamina. So I'd say this is overall a buff. Prudent now only increases combat effectiveness by +5%, while in command radius, instead of giving all units a permanent +5% combat effectiveness at all times. This is a nerf. Um, Obviously because you have to be in the command radius of the unit, but I believe prudent also reduces the officer morale radius. So you only get this bonus if you're in the command radius. Oh, and by the way, the command radius is smaller. So this is a I think this is a significant nerf to this trait. And I would probably not take it. Um, yeah. At least I want it. You guys can, but I don't think I would take it. Legendary now gives plus 5% combat effectiveness instead of plus 10%, but I buffed its officer death chance up to negative 20%. Elusive now provides plus 10% cover effectiveness instead of plus 5%. As the trait felt weak, sure, that's good. The Star Fort encounter is more common on the fort style encounters in Acts 2 and 3. So I mean, that makes forts more difficult because you have to siege them down. Slightly lowered the chance of negative encounters spawning on the slum encounters. That's good. Slums were, in my opinion, slums were either pretty good or pretty awful. So that's good. Lowered the weights of all encounters that give you free units. Now that units are more expensive, I don't want the primary way of building your army to be memorizing certain encounter types that disproportionately give you free units. And here's some quality of life changes. Um, so now there are buttons that let you toggle whether you want your bayonets equipped at the beginning of battle or you'd rather have them not equipped. And then you can also load your specialty ammunition before battle here. So that's cool. You can now pay to remove officer traits. That's a really good quality of life improvement because sometimes you would find a really good officer, but he had just like one trait that didn't fit what you wanted. Now you can buy that officer and remove that bad trait, and that's good. There's now a hover to see the morale and stamina maximums instead of the current value. That's good. You can now see when an officer got killed. That's good. Cover effectiveness is now displayed on the tooltip alongside an explanation of what it does. Very nice. I really like this one. Move speed is now consistently displayed as a slash, so you can see the walk speed and the run speed of a unit. I love that. And then tooltips were updated on artillery to show if they consume more ammunition due to being a higher quality gun. Cool. And now there are little animations that change depending on your stance. So if you're raiding, you'll get a little torch. If you're in foraging, you'll get a little sickle. This is force march. They redid the way that this looks. Here's the old compared to the new. Um, I kind of like the style of the old one more. I like the little buildings. I like the little buildings on the new ones, but I kind of like the style of the old ones. But not like a big deal. Okay, and those are the major changes. Earlier, I mentioned um, the unit bias, right? So, like, if you're playing as the Saxons, they currently have a bias towards finding more Saxon units. If you don't like that, you can use this workshop mod in order to change that, which I might use that in the future. I don't know. We'll see. Um, but cool, we did it. We ran through all the patch notes. Sorry, that was probably a long-winded explanation of everything. Overall, there were some interesting changes here. I don't know that I agree with all of them, but I think that the good outweighs the bad, generally speaking. I mean, almost certainly, right? Almost certainly the good outweighs the bad. But we'll know for sure once we get into a campaign and start playing and see what the increased costs look like. I will say, I think this is going to make a martial difficulty run far more difficult because if you are increasing the base cost of units, right? Let me see if I can find that. Um, let's see, unit costs. Okay, here we go. All unit prices have gone up by $50, and then recruits have gone up even more. There is already a difficulty modifier that increases the cost of units. So if you're increasing the base cost and the difficulty modifier is a percentage increase, that means that these are going to be even harder to buy. Um, so units are going to be more expensive, and you're going to be getting less money because the inaccurate reports, wherever that was, inaccurate reports is no longer going to be giving you extra money in battles. Yeah, so I mean, I think a martial difficulty run just got meaningfully more difficult. I don't know if it'll be like significantly harder, but it's a meaningful difference for sure. Um, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, I'm done harping on it. I think if you're playing the base game, no difficulty modifiers, I think overall this is good. These are good changes. I think I'm only griping a little bit because I think it makes a martial difficulty run a lot more difficult. And I like playing on martial because I think it makes the game. I think if I played on like a normal difficulty, I think the game would be too easy. But I don't like increasing the difficulty of things just for the sake of increasing the difficulty, um, which I feel like this update does if you're playing on martial difficulty. But it's fine. I'm done griping. I'm done complaining. Thanks everyone for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think of the update, and we'll see how it goes. Um, I think it'll be good. I think it'll be good for most people. So we'll just have to get in and play and get our thoughts on it, and we'll do that. So looking forward to the Frycore campaign that I'm going to be starting up soon, and we'll see you when we start in that campaign.